Hey YouTube, what is up? You saw me opening my Monarch cards that I got in the mail the other day, and here is the deck profile for that deck. It's not just regular Monarchs, it is Super Quantum Monarchs, and if you don't know what that is, I'll explain a little later when you see the cards that are coming up. Basically though, this deck, when it was incomplete, I actually got 2nd place in my locals, and I also got 5th place in my locals. But that's at 2 different shops, so that might not be too specific, but getting 2nd and 5th with an incomplete deck really isn't all that shabby in my mind. So here we go. Without further ado, to start things off, I run 2 Max C. I've seen people suggesting that you run 3 of these, and I don't really like that. You don't want to really draw into too many cards that you don't need, and in the Monarch matchup, this is basically only good for 1 draw when they summon their idea and then bring out the YUGIOH. So unless you're playing something that's not Monarchs, this is pretty useless if you're playing Monarchs. That's the best way to put it. So it's not too bad. I'd rather not have 3 of them in a deck if I know I'm going up against Monarchs round 1, and I'd rather have 2. Plus, with Monarchs, you just have so much draw power, it really doesn't make a difference. You can draw into one of them regardless within probably the first 2 or 3 turns, especially if you're playing Monarchs fast, like the way you're kind of supposed to play them to get your resources out. You're definitely going to see one of these in your hand, so there's no reason to play any more than 2, I think. Same reason I actually play 2 Ghost Ogre. Now, the reason I play Ghost Ogre instead of Effect Veiler is because I like the ability to pop a face-up spell or trap that activates its effect, and also the ability to pop a monster that activates effect. It doesn't negate the effect like Effect Veiler does, so that's what Effect Veiler has that, Ghost Ogre doesn't, but the difference is, if my opponent has an Herberus on the field, or, a high-level monster, and then I know they can get over my monster, and they decide to, wipe the field, or activate the monster's effect in any way, Ghost Ogre destroys that card, and basically it gets destroyed, and its effect still goes off, yes, but then they don't have the large monster to attack with. If they have Herberus and they're swinging back one of my monsters on my field to my deck with their non-targeting Herberus, it pops their card too. So that's why I like to run it. It basically gets rid of my opponent's monster that's using its effect, and usually the higher attack monsters tend to have the better effects, so I don't mind getting rid of a high level monster too. Next, I run 1 blue layer, and I run 1 red layer. If you don't know what these are basically cards from the new Power Ranger archetype, and these are your tribute fodder engines that you run in Monarchs besides Idea and YUGIOH. Blue layer is a target for E-Teleport, and when it's special summoned, you get to add another Super Quant card to your hand. You can add Super Quantum Layer Red to your hand if you want, and that's basically the play. This special summons from E-Tele, and then you sacrifice it. This, you don't need a monster on the field. If you don't have a monster on the field, this special summons itself. That's the best way to put it. And then you can tribute summon on top of that for your 1 normal summon that turn if you didn't draw Idea or YUGIOH. It's a good way to play the game, because if you special summon this, you immediately get this to hand. So next turn, if your opponent happens to kill your monster, you have nothing on the field, you have a way to get out a Monarch turn 1. Or, the next turn in response to that, which really isn't that bad. When red layer goes to the graveyard, it special summons a Monarch from the graveyard that's not himself, and it adds it to the field, but its effect doesn't activate. So when this goes to the grave, and you happen to have blue layer in the graveyard, if you chose not to activate its effect, it gets special summoned again, which is really, really good. And then when blue layer goes to the graveyard, it can recycle itself back into the deck, making sure you only need to run 1 of these in your deck and then 3 E-Teleport, because it can recycle itself pretty much every time you use E-Teleport, and it can recycle red layer back to the deck as well if you are done using it, which is why I like to run 1 of each. I've seen people run 2 red layer, but that's personally too much for me and I don't like it, but I'm building Power Rangers, so I'm going to pick them up eventually anyway. I also run 1 Majesty's Fiend and 2 Vanity's Fiend. Now, the reason I only run 1 Majesty's Fiend is because Majesty's Fiend is searchable in this deck because of its similar attack to the Monarchs, which is 2400 attack and 1000 defense. Vanity's Fiend is not searchable, so you run 2 so you could draw into it with the Monarch's drawing ability. So you can't search it out, but you can eventually get it to hand, which really isn't that bad. And I've had people pull out both Majesty's Fiend and Vanity's Fiend on me in 1 turn, and that is broken as hell. So it's a good card to run. It stops effects. There's, the other one stops special summons. You can't really complain with either one. So, yeah, there's really no reason to not run them in this deck. They are a good side out if you feel they're useless, but, I like to keep them in. I also run 2 Idea and 2 YUGIOH. The reason I only run 2 is because I don't want to draw into them too much. I don't really like to draw into the black one anyway, because when you draw into him, you only have 1 normal summon extra that turn. Idea summons YUGIOH, and then you get 2 tributes and the extra summon that turn, which is really, really good. The only problem is Edea is really easy to Effect Veiler, and is pretty much, as soon as you drop this, your opponent's going to drop an Effect Veiler, and your turn's going to pretty much end there because you already wasted your normal summon. That's why I like the Power Rangers. It doesn't matter if their effects are negated, they're already on the field, and you can still normal summon for that turn. So these are good, but you know, I only run 2 of each because if I were to run more than that, I feel like it would clog the deck up, and I already run a decent amount of cards. For the Monarchs, next up, I like to run 1 Thestalos and 1 Karaz. Now, Karaz is good, but he's not great. I'm considering actually taking him out because he does miss time if you use him with the Quantum cards and you choose to activate the Blue Layer's ability, because his effect reads when, so if his effect, you know, he has to basically be the last thing to resolve in a chain link to have his effect go. So if he's not, you know, the last thing in a chain link, his effect doesn't go off because he's not the last thing to happen. If you special summon Blue Layer, sacrifice Blue Layer for Karaz, and then recycle Blue Layer back off the same chain, then Karaz loses his ability because he's not the last thing to resolve. Thestalos is absolutely broken. I would consider actually running 2 of him. I'm not really sure yet. He's great turn 1, especially if your opponent plays Cosmos or anything big. Thestalos normal summoned on your first turn, you look at your opponent's hand, take a card out of their hand. You get to see what their whole hand is, by the way. You get to look at the whole hand, take whatever card you want. If it's a monster, they lose life points equal to that monster's level times 200. If you're playing Cosmos and you rip Dark Destroyer out of their hands, they start with 4 cards and their life points are already at 6,400, which is ridiculous. And I love opening up Thestalos, so that's why I might take out Karaz and run 2 Thestalos, but I'm not sure yet. Next, I run 3 of the Dark Monarch, because he is great. Herberus is amazing. He's a non-targeting spot removal in the field and shuffles it back to deck. He's basically Castel, that's the best way to put it. He could also take a random card from your opponent's hand, or a card, I think, from the graveyard. So, you know, he's really, really good. He's your way of getting cards into your graveyard to basically kickstart your engine if you can't do it. With him, you have to send 2 spell or traps to the graveyard. Same thing with the big white Monarch Ether, but, you know, he's good because you can send I think it's, was it Pantheism, and you can send Prime Monarch. Pantheism banishes itself, you get another Monarch card to the hand, and then you can start your engine up if you haven't gotten, you know, into your draw engine pretty much already. Speaking of the white Monarch Ether, I run 3 of her as well. She is really good. I like running 3 of her because she can special summon, and she can special summon another Monarch whenever she's summoned, tribute summon that is, and she can tribute summon herself on your opponent's turn. So you could tribute summon her, bring out Ether, you could bring out herself, next turn, have 1 in hand, tribute your Ether on field, tribute summon herself, and then bring out the 3rd one from your deck, and then tribute summon herself on the next turn. You basically have plays to stop your opponent from destroying your monsters, or if they target your monster, sacrifice it, the target's gone. So it's a really, really good play. Ether also searches out Thestalos, which is broken in my mind. So that's why I like to run 3 of her. And now onto Monarchs. Being Monarchs, there's a lot of spells and traps. Actually, there's a lot of spells and very few traps. So onto the spells. The one-off spells that I run is 1 Burial from a Different Dimension. This is really good because Eidos banishes himself to special summon from your graveyard 1 Idea. So if you choose to use this card, you can bring back your Eidos to the graveyard and then banish it again to special summon Idea. And when Idea hits the graveyard, it recycles cards that you have banished that are spell traps. It goes back to hand. So it's a really good way to get your Pantheism back. I think it's a nice tech in this deck. It's a good side out too in the match if you know you're not going to run it that long. I also run Reinforcement of the Army, 1 of them, because that allows you to get Idea to hand. I also run 1 for 1, it lets you get Idea to hand. And I run 1 Foolish Burial because you can send Herberus to the graveyard, and when Herberus is in the graveyard, you can add any Monarch that's in the graveyard along with Herberus to your hand because it, you know, it's its effect. That's really what it is. So you just ditch a Monarch spell or trap and you get the card to your hand, which is really, really good. This can also send Idea to the graveyard if you really, really need a banished spell or trap card in a pinch, so it's not that bad. That's it for the one-offs though. Then I run 3 E-Teleports, because I'm playing Super Quantum Monarchs and you need the E-Teles to bring up Blue Layer. I play 1 March of the Monarchs and 1 Return of the Monarchs because this lets you search out your Majesty's Fiend and this lets you just protect your entire field. There was a turn where I literally opened up Majesty's Fiend, this, and the field spell. My opponent couldn't special summon from extra deck, monster effects couldn't be activated, and my card couldn't be destroyed by monsters or card effects. So it was really, really, really good. And my opponent did lose that turn, or that duel, because I just opened up broken. Next, I play 3 Pantheism. This card is great. You need 3 of it. It's a good card to ditch and in a pinch because you can banish this from your graveyard and add another spell or trap. If you don't know, you have this in a hand and another Monarch spell or trap. You can basically just activate. It's basically a trade-in for Monarch spell or traps, which is really, really good. I also play 3 Tenacity because this is a good way to force your opponent's hand when you're using Pantheism's effect in the graveyard. Pantheism lets you select 3 cards from your deck and your opponent chooses one to add to your hand. If you choose the 1 card you want and 2 Tenacities and you have a Monarch in hand, you're going to be able to add that card to hand because Tenacity says you reveal a Monarch in your hand, add a Monarch spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So you just show this and however many of the other cards you have, and then you're basically forcing them to give you that card, which is really broken in my mind. I also play 3 Domain of the Monarchs because you need the field spell. It allows you to tribute summon only 1 monster to bring out Monarchs. It allows you to get 800 additional attack when you attack an opponent's monster, and your opponent can't special summon from the extra deck. I'm pretty sure this is one of the most broken field spells so far, and you can ditch it with Pantheism, and you can banish it for the spells and traps in this deck as well. I use 2 Monarch Stormforth. I don't use 3. It's really easy to get it to hand if you need it, and I don't want my deck to be too huge. And I also play 2 Prime Monarch because it's really, really good. This card, if you don't know, has an effect like Ritual Beast Canahawk, I think it is, where this card, when it's on the field, you can target 2 cards in the graveyard and then send them back to deck, and then you draw 1, which is really, really good. But if you activate a chain and you have Prime Monarch in the graveyard, you can activate its secondary effect, which lets it banish a spell or trap card, and then this goes onto the field as a monster in defense position. So what you can do is activate this as a active trap and then select 2 cards in your graveyard, one of them being Prime Monarch and one of them being a spell or trap. You activate this Prime Monarch in the graveyard's effect to banish a different spell or trap other than the one you target. This gets sent to the field as a normal monster. You recycle 1 card back to your deck and you draw 1, which is a really, really good effect in my mind. And then I play 1 Escalation of the Monarchs on top of that because tribute summoning on my opponent's turn is pretty broken. Next up for my side deck, there is no extra deck this time around because I am playing Monarchs. I play 2 of basically every card. I like to play 2 Twin Twister because it's Twin Twister and it's decent. Your opponent's going to run a lot of back row against you probably, which is why you want Twin Twister. If you're playing against Monarchs, it's not a bad side in either. If you destroy their field spell and, anything else really they have on the field, like Return of the Monarchs or March of the Monarchs, it comes in handy. So I like to run 2 of them. I only run 2 because this deck does go through cards so fast that it really doesn't force you to have 3. You can draw so fast, you really only need 2 in my mind. I also play 2 Royal Decree for this exact same reason. Stops your opponent from activating traps on you and stops basically dicking you around because traps are the one thing Monarchs have a hard time going up against in my mind. Next, I play 3 Chaos Trap Hole because if I know my opponent is a very basically extra deck heavy deck and I know I'm not going to draw my field spell soon enough, like say they play some kind of pendulum deck or something like that, I would rather send their cards back to deck and force them to not have an extra deck and just keep going my own way. Time Space Trap Hole comes in handy, and you draw so fast you're bound to draw one at least within the first turn or 2, so that's when I'd like to see them. I run 3 only because if I'm siding this in, I want to see it turn 1 immediately. That's the only reason I run 3 of them. I also play 2 Intercept, which in the Monarch Mirror match is the best card in my mind. A lot of people don't say not to run it. They say it's not good. It won me a Monarch Mirror match, which actually let me go further into the tournament that I was playing. Intercept, basically, if your opponent tribute summons 1 tribute monster, and if your opponent tribute summons using 1 tribute, you get to take that monster. They do get the monster's effect, but you do get their monster. I was playing the mirror match, my opponent activated the field spell, summoned an Herberus, activated Intercept, took the Herberus, and then I forced him to basically use Herberus' own effect to send his monster that I took back to his deck. So he activated and summoned an Herberus. Its effect didn't really go off because it targeted itself, and it sent it back to his own deck. He had no more normal summons, tribute summons for that turn, and he ended his turn, and then I just attacked him. So Intercept is really, really good. I like to play 2 of them, and because it's a counter trap, it's spell speed 3, so it's hard to really react to unless you have something like... I can't even think of anything that would really react to it. Next up, I play 2 Galaxy Cyclone because I do run Twin Twister, and Galaxy Cyclone itself is really good too. And because it can activate in the graveyard, if I have Galaxy Cyclone and Twin Twister in hand, I can ditch Galaxy Cyclone with Twin Twister, then Next turn, ditch Galaxy Cyclone from my graveyard and banish it and activate its effect again. So it's a nice card to have. I really like the artwork on it too. It has 2 effects, you know, one in the graveyard, one in hand. So it's really, really useful, especially in a deck that sends so many cards to the graveyard. It's not that bad to have in Monarchs. I think it's better than MST in my mind, but you know, you can have your own opinions and that's perfectly fine. Next up, I play 3 Fog King, and the reason I do 3 Fog King is because of the Monarch mirror match, pretty much. If you can summon this, normal summon it, you don't need to tribute, but you can tribute 1 monster, you can normal summon it, or you can tribute 2 monsters. Its attack becomes whatever the attack of the monsters you tributed was. So if you just want to lock your opponent, you can normal summon it, and then your opponent's locked and they can't tribute summon. If you want to build a wall your opponents can't get over, tribute 2 Monarchs you have, that's 2,800 each. Right there, you have a 5,600 monster on your side of the field, and your opponent can't tribute summon anymore. So it's really almost impossible for them to get over unless they draw Raigeki. So that's really why I like to play Fog King, 3 of them, because you really want to see it turn 1. Other cards, you know, you can draw into and it's not as bad, but Fog King, Chaos Trap Hole, you really want to see it turn 1, and that's why I like to run 3 of them. And last up, the last Majesty's Fiend. I like to put another one in the extra deck, just so that if I do really need 2 Majesty's Fiend for some reason, I can search them out, and if I don't search them out quick enough, I can put 2 in and draw into it quicker. That's the only reason I play the second one. But that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments or questions about how I run my Monarchs, don't forget to let me know in the comments down below. You can follow me on Twitter @Schwabs, or you can like my Facebook page, facebook.com/TheVinnyDShow. If you really like the video, you can click subscribe because it's free, it's fun, and I'll see you guys in the next one.